Hello again. Welcome to Raising Teens. I'm Ben McEachern. I am joined, as ever, by psychologist and teacher Colette Smart. Colette, how's things?
Good. I'm looking forward to this question today.
Yeah.
Because it's something I think we all deal with.
Bit of a ripper. If you have a sibling, you definitely would have dealt with this. Sibling rivalry, and particularly sibling rivalry in the teenage years.
Yeah.
My goodness. Colette, what is happening with that?
Yeah, so look, I think most households struggle with this, and it's the topic that is often one of the most painful parts of parenting in the day-to-day stuff. And I know I've had to deal with it many times in my parenting years, and I have some young adults in the home and teenagers, and it still happens in our home. I think it's a normal part of human interaction and human day-to-day conflict or disagreements that might come up, and
competitiveness just seems to arise in all of us.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think, although it doesn't make it easier, I think siblings fight and bickering is part of relationships, and I think it can depend on your children's personality styles. It can depend on the age difference, age gaps, your children's maturity. I know sometimes I say to my young adult siblings, you need to remember that you are now the adult. Stop arguing with your 13-year-old brother, because but for them it's just, they're still just siblings. They're still in that space of, being their brother's sibling. But I think for our teenagers, we also need to remember, particularly our younger teens or our teens in high school, they're still very much caught up between this child and adult phase. And it's fascinating watching. I used to forget, and I still sometimes forget with my youngest, that sometimes they still revert back to being the child. And some days you will see the semi-adult or adult thinking breakthrough, and you think, whoa, yes, I'm rocking this parent thing. And then other days like, yeah, nah. And that's just part of parenting. And so I think it's recognizing that adults also have feelings where we disagree, don't have expectations of our teens that we don't even follow through in ourselves, in our own relationships with our partners or work colleagues, and knowing that our young people's brains take longer to develop, so they blurt things out that can be painful. And I think sometimes even in the heat of the moment, we need to even look for some of the positives of growth. I mean, sometimes there isn't growth, and that's also all right, but those times when our siblings argue, or our children argue as siblings, it's a time to also teach the opportunities to teach relationship skills. And even in tough situations, those are the times our children learn the most.
I wanted to ask you about that before we get on to different types of sibling rivalry, because there's all sorts of different sorts that it can manifest in your house. But for someone who's listening like me, whose kids are not yet teenagers, they're a long way away, but I would like to start early and try to help them with sibling rivalry. What do you recommend that we start doing in terms of teaching or modelling to them about how they interact as siblings?
So I think it's not having unrealistic expectations, and also remembering you often can't teach good negotiation skills or interaction skills in the heat of the moment. And I know I've tried that as a parent sometimes, because you're so frustrated at that moment, and you're trying to hammer down how to interact well, and they can't hear it when emotions are frayed and everyone's a bit over the top.
I've tried that.
Yeah,
it didn't go so well.
No, it never does. And so it's usually afterwards or in the calmer times that we can help them to look at what could have been done differently. And it's hard for me to give a specific example, because it's going to change depending on your children's age and stage, and you are going to have to negotiate things at different times in their lives, and they're going to have things that are more stressful or more meaningful to them at different ages. And so I think it's really knowing there's not a quick and easy solution, but it's looking at sometimes are our children trying to be deliberately annoying, because sometimes they just are.
Yeah,
it depends on their personality, but sometimes, you might actually have to send them off in opposite directions and just say, look, you go down that side of the house, you go play outside for a while, and actually separate them.
So that's a good way to respond to that kind of annoying situation where one sibling's annoying the other. But why do they actually do it? Or that kind of needling at each other, that sort of like slow burn effect where they're just kind of constantly hassling. I may or may not have done this to my twin brother. But why do they do it? Why does sibling rivalry manifest like that?
So I think sometimes it can be what you're asking is what are the patterns, and I think we've got to look for the patterns. So sometimes it's about something that's triggered them, so they're actually fighting over something specific, playing with the Xbox, or sitting on a specific chair, or whatever it might be. I mean, we got to the point where our kids at the kitchen bench still, not that they fight over that anymore because it's just now a habit, they actually got specific chairs at the table because they used to bicker about who sat where and whose turn it was.
It's like who sits in the middle on the back seat of the car.
Exactly right. We had that as well. So, and my poor youngest is still that sits in the middle, and he's like, I'm almost taller than my sister now. But so sometimes you take that facet out of the argument and you just go, yep, now we all sit at certain spots. But other times it could actually be because they're tired. It's the time of day. It could be school holiday periods towards the end of the school holidays. Sometimes it could be fighting over you and your attention. And sometimes you're just the audience. And I find removing myself as the audience has sometimes taken that dynamic out. And they don't even realize that they're looking for your attention. But also, it's also looking at, for some of our teens, what's driving them might be they really genuinely are wanting connection with you, and they're not able to verbalize that, and they don't realize that, but they actually need one-on-one time with you, and they're in some ways competing for your attention. So it's being sure that we're giving our children some quality time each privately on their own. That's important.
And you discussed earlier, Colette, about some behaviour that we can do as parents, such as not diving in the heat of the moment, but maybe discussing the situation once it's cooled down. What about in genuine conflict? Like when your kids are going at it because they are going at it, what do parents do then?
Look, of course, genuine bullying and even violence in homes that does happen in households, and that is obviously another issue completely, but you cannot ignore that. So at times like that, you protect the child who is the victim. That is absolutely something that you would need to do, and then you may need professional intervention. But in terms of if it's just intensity and frequency of your teenager's behavior has increased, that is when we need to look at, is there some underlying issue for that particular teen? Are they going through a period of anxiety or stress at school, or they're being bullied themselves? So it's looking at, sometimes our teenagers are lashing out at their family members because there's something else going on behind the scenes. But then also, I often talk about getting our kids to work on a task together, and finding ways to work on something together, planning a holiday or an outing together. For some teens that doesn't work because they do bicker about that. But I often find when there is a common goal and they're working towards something positive, that can teach them new skills that they didn't know they had when they are working together. But I think overall, the big one for me is also modeling to our children what good conflict looks like, because as adults in the home, we will have conflict with other people. What does that look like? How do we apologize? Saying sorry, and then noticing when they do things well. So don't just talk about when they're bickering and how they're fighting terribly. Talk about when they treat each other well. Say, wow, I loved the way you spoke to your sister this morning, or I heard you being so kind. That was such an amazing way to respond. So they actually recognize what appropriate or healthy behavior looks like. They sometimes don't recognize it until it's pointed out to them.
There might be other issues or concerns going on in your home at the moment, or you can see them coming on the horizon. We would love to hear from you, and so we can get Colette's wisdom in an upcoming episode. You can contact us at hopepodcast.com.au, find the Raising Teens page, or go to the Hope Media app, find the Raising Teens page, and get in touch with us there. We would love to hear from you. This has been Raising Teens with Colette Smart. See you next time.